Latin America or North America as well. Nice afternoon for Europe and Africa, and have a nice evening in Japan and Australia. We'll start in like 2 minutes the webinar. We are still waiting for some late coming participants, so please hold with us for 2 minutes. If you can give me just a feedback whether your picture is okay and the sound is fine, so I can ask you for in the chat if you can tell me whether it works fine for you. Hello, Banked. Can you hear me well? Sound and image okay? Great. So I'll just grab a glass of water and I'll be with you in a minute and we'll start. So all perfect, we can start. Today it should be a little bit shorter than normally. I have around only 12, 13 slides, as we'll be talking about just one feature of the Sigfox network or one pretty narrow object. Hello, Edison. Nice to see you. So let's start. It should be a little bit shorter than 40 minutes, definitely. I'm listing here important articles, so if you want not to listen to all the presentation, you can also read the articles. You'll be able to see the recording of the webinar afterwards, and we're also listing a comparison of the Monarch support in different versions of the SimpleHw in the SimpleHw 3.0 plus Wi-Fi tracker. So very short, because I assume all of you know what is a radio zone. So I'll be very brief in the description. Sigfox works on open frequencies or regulated frequencies, but not licensed frequencies all over the world. There are different regulations in each of the set of the countries. We have ETSI in Europe, there's FCC in the United States, there's ARIBA in Japan. So each of the region has its own regulation, and the different radio zones, they differ basically by 2 or 3 major parameters. One is the frequency where the uplink is. One is the data rate by which you are sending up the messages to the Sigfox network, and also the way how you manage the collision between packets. So whether you do frequency hopping or whether you do listen before talk, as in Japan. So those are the major differences between the different radio zones. This is a table taken from the Sigfox website, which describes shortly the different radio zones. So it's RC1 for Middle East, Africa, and Europe. RC2 it's for United States, Canada, and part of LATAM. RC3 is for Japan. RC4 is for Australia and part of LATAM. RC5 is for South Korea, and RC6 is for India. Maybe there will be some more coming in the future. The discussion is how it will be with Russia, but this is the basic set. You can see that the frequencies, they don't differ that much. So that's one of the reasons for which also Sigfox can work worldwide, because the antenna, you can have only a single antenna, and you don't need to, which is a little bit wide in the tuning, and you don't need different antennas for the myriads of different frequencies. For instance, if you compare it with narrowband IoT is currently working, I think, on 15 different frequencies that are pretty far apart. So doing an antenna during a device or NB-IoT is far more complicated than doing a device for Sigfox. So when a device travels from one of the radio zones to another one, The basic principle is it is that it's not supposed to be emitting in the zone where it's not approved. So when a device from Europe comes to United States, it's supposed not to emit on 868 because it's not an allowed frequency in the United States. The same when the device from the United States come to Europe, it's not supposed to work on 1915, 1950 or 1920. Those are the RC2 and RC4 frequencies. So in order for the device to support worldwide coverage, you need to achieve three things. You don't need still to achieve Monarch, but you need to achieve those three things. The antenna needs to support the different frequencies, so it needs to be multi-frequency enabled. The switching between the RC needs to be enabled in the firmware, so the device must be able to switch between different radio zones, and you need to find a mode or a way how to switch between the different radio zones. And switching between radio zones, that's the holy grail. How to achieve switching between when a device travels from Europe to United States. How to achieve the switching. There are several ways how you can achieve that. We will go shortly through the different options. Manual way, of course, if you have a device that's activated in Europe, you arrive to you switch it off before boarding the plane. You switch it on in United States. So you can manually, we are even supporting that in our devices. So you can manually switch it to the proper radio zones. You can have a switch, or you can have some kind of special movement that switches the devices into the specific zone. So that's the manual. It's not very practical because you need to have human beings at the device when you are tracking something. It's not practical, but it's important to understand that you can switch it manually. The other option is to switch it by time. So when you have a predefined way of the goods, and you know that the goods are traveling from Europe to Mexico for 14 days, so you know that you can switch from radio zone 1 to radio zone 2. I think Mexico is 2, but to the radio zone in Mexico you can switch within 10 days. After 10 days, when the goods arrive to Mexico, it works fine. The only issue with the time is that you have to have some kind of judgment or estimate when the goods are arriving. That's one thing. The other one is that it can have, if the goods are not transported into the final country, for instance, when they stay in your country, so you will not be able to see the device after the predefined time period. The other option is GPS. If the device has a GPS, so you can and you set up in the firmware, in the logic of the device, you set up boundaries. So you can sniff GPS. The device can tell, okay, I am now in within this coordinates, and the device can switch to the proper radio zone. Then the other option is the world time emitter. The towers or broadcasting emitters that are working in Europe, that are working in America. They are using different frequencies. So by sniffing this world time code emitter, you are able to switch to the proper radio zone. That's also one option that you can implement. You can have also the Wi-Fi beacons. If you have a pre-managed tracking way, and you know that it's always that the goods are always going out of the country through this specific port, and you can be sure that either you will have managed Wi-Fi beacons in this port, or you know that those are the Wi-Fi beacons that can be seen at the port. So you can switch the radio zone by seeing those Wi-Fi beacons. You can change it automatically by. I will for the world time code emitter. I will send you afterwards the link to the Wikipedia if there's a Wikipedia article about it. You can also change it automatically by the takeoff landing, or on the airport, or port raising highs during reloading. So if you know that the goods are coming just from Europe to United States, and there will be one flight on the way. So by sensing the takeoff or landing, you can change the radio zones in the device itself, even without using Monarch or anything. And of course, you can have Bluetooth or RFID beacons or gates if the company uses current RFID beacons, so you can sense where the devices are, and according to the RFID beacons, you can change the radio zones. And the last but not least is the Monarch technology, which kind of supports or enables some of those things. And that we'll be talking about. I just want to illustrate that Monarch is not. You can switch to different radio zones even without having Monarch. So Monarch is helping you, but it's not something that you cannot live without for some of the use cases. So what is Monarch? Imagine Monarch is it's a very good analogy. It's a lighthouse. Basically, it's a signal that is being emitted by the base stations. It's a signal that is emitted each 5 minutes. And the issue is that it's the same way as the lighthouses are not inland, but they are only in the ports. So the same way the Monarch beacons are currently enabled only in the maritime ports and only in the airports, which is slightly a complication, because if you don't see this beacon, and according to the beacon have like different colors or different patterns, and if you see this specific pattern of on the beacon, you know which radio zones you are in. So you know whether you are in Europe or in Australia or in Hong Kong. The major issue here is that the beacons are not enabled on all base stations. So if you miss the port of arrival, you are missing, your device basically gets lost, because if you are just relying on Monarch on nothing else, if you are not combining it with time or with something else, you are not going to be able to switch the device into the proper radio zone, and the device is lost forever. The question is when to listen to Monarch. You know that the basics of Sigfox, or the basic philosophy of Sigfox, is that the devices are sleeping, they are not listening, they are not emitting, and they are just emitting if some kind of event happens. So even if the device needs to be active and needs to listen to the Monarch, it's pretty energy demanding. And for instance, if you are listening to a Monarch beacon, when you don't know when the beacon is, you need to listen for the whole 5 minutes. And the 5 minutes listening, it takes about 40 messages of energy. So you try to find ways how not to have to listen to Monarch all the time. And so when to listen to Monarch? Basically, you should do listening only to Monarch only when you are in the port. Either I will be referring it as a port, but it means also an airport. So you should listen to the Monarch if you know when it will arrive to the port. So you can use the different methods to know when it's arriving to the port. We'll mention some of them later on, but the simplest one is time. So when you know that your goods are arriving to the airport within 2 days, so within 2 days you start listening to the Monarch. You can then think a little bit better if you hear the Monarch in the port of exit, in your port of departure. You can sync to the Monarch, and then you'll be waiting for the port of arrival Monarch beacon. So time is pretty important. The other option is you can physically detect that it is at the port. I have the next slide will be how to physically detect that the device is at the port. And the third option is that you can have a precise timer. that is listening to the Monarch at specified time slot, because there's this 5 minutes interval. It's a worldwide interval. There's a small shift, but it's not that important. So instead of listening for the full 5 minutes, so if your internal time clock is very well synced and you can keep a precise timing. So instead of listening for 5 minutes, you can listen just for instance 30-40 seconds in order to be able to detect whether the Monarch beacon is there or not. And of course, the best way is to combine the different methods. I will explain what is the physical detect just in this slide. So we have what are the physical options of port detecting. The thing that is it's a little bit undervalued, but sometimes it can be used as a GPS boundary position. So if you have a smart GPS tracker and you are able to use GPS, because for instance for the pallet tracking you are not able to use GPS, but for container tracking you are. So if you have a smart GPS tracker, so you can set a boundary inside the GPS tracker that the device is currently in the port, and you can start listening. You can start listening to the beacon. Then there's a barometric trigger, barometric pressure, and it can work both for airports and for port containers. For airports, you know that the pressure is going lower when the airport takes off, when the airplane takes off, or when it lands. So there's a change in pressure. So this can be detected, and according to that, the logic of behavior can be set up. The other option is to have, when you have containers, so even raising the container up to 5-10 meters when you load and unload, it can trigger the Monarch listening, because you are able to say, okay, the container raised by 10 meters, and therefore we should start listening to the Monarch. The thing that we are currently doing a little bit of research, it's theoretically possible, but we haven't done it yet, is using just accelerometer for planes taking off and landing. So mathematically it's possible. We have not implemented it yet. And the fourth option, it's more on the logical side. It's not so much physical, but having for instance, downlink request from having 1 hour downlink request from the device is far more energy efficient than to listen to Monarch regularly. So you can have a logic on your backend side, on the platform side, that it's tracking the arrival of the devices, that is tracking arrivals of the containers to the port. And based on the position, so you see on the way, the system sees on the way, he sees in the port, and he can start listening or syncing to the Monarch. So again, it's based on more on the logic than on the, but it's location based, so it's physical as well. So those are currently options. Definitely one can find out other things. You know, if for instance you have a customs inspection, that it's always happening, so you can have light detection when a container gets always open on the border. So you can just put light detection, and you can say, okay, listen to the Monarch once the light gets in. You can find definitely more options. You can have some kind of read contacts. Or if something different, it's really important to understand that it needs to have a proper analysis of the process. Then this is a slide. What is currently the support of Monarch on the side of SimpleHw, of the SimplePack tracker, and we recommend doing always analysis. What is your use case? So we are supporting it in 3 different versions. One is the classical Wi-Fi tracker that costs 25 euros, and it supports all the radio zones. and you can switch this one. You can switch by button. You can switch it by downlink, or you can switch it by time. So you have options. If your route is known, you don't need to rely on Monarch. You just switch it by time. You just switch it by downlink whenever you need it. You can have also a delayed downlink. So if you know that it arrives to the port, you know it'll be in the seas for 5 days. So you'll put in downlink, switch to the proper radio zones within 5 days. The other option is the Wi-Fi Monarch tracker, which is available, which is in production. It's for €30, and that's a version where we are listening already to Monarch. It's a version that doesn't support barometer, but it supports all other sensors. And we are a little bit limited by memory in this version because the Monarch libraries are a little bit bigger. So we are only in the API 6 in the feature set of we are only supporting the tracking mode. We are not supporting the other modes of SimpleHw, but only the tracking modes are supported and the tracking logic is supported. And then we have a new arrival. You have not probably heard of it because it's quite fresh. And we are calling it Advanced Edition. It's a new PCB. It's a new design where we are able to produce devices that contain that have very precise timing, so we can sync to the Monarch precisely. It has we are supporting barometer, we are supporting gyroscope, we are supporting pedometer. So we are supporting more sensors on the PCB. Still the same size, still the same API. Everything is the same. We have it. I'll bring it from the other room. Just hold on for 1 minute. So this is a new device. It's very similar to the old one. Still Sigfox antenna, Wi-Fi module. Most of it is the same. You can tell very clearly that this is the barometer. This part is the barometer. We have also the gyroscope supporting pedometer, and we have also external SPI interface, and we have external crystal. So we are able to sync the time, to keep the internal timing very, very precisely. We're also supporting external temperature meter and external switches if you need to integrate it into your current product. So this is something that's the firmware is done. We'll be announcing it officially, I think, within like 1 month. But pre-orders, if you write it, I don't think that you can pre-order it yet on the website. But if you write us email, so you can definitely pre-order it. So that was the Advanced Edition. Here also on the slide there is a link to the Monarch support by SimpleHw 3.0. We have like a complete listing of all the parameters, number of messages, numbers of sniffing, everything is there. A battery life the battery life is 10 years. What is the most limited? The sensors in most of the cases, it's not the limitation. The major limit are Sigfox messages. So Sigfox messages are most often the most intensive from the battery point of view, from energy point of view. So when I was mentioning, for instance, the Monarch listening, so I was expressing it in the number of messages that you are losing out of this 30,000 messages. So again, it depends completely on the use case. We are currently preparing versions with new, little bit bigger casings. That's polycarbonate, and that supports 85 degrees Celsius and 150 degrees Celsius. We'll be using different batteries. that are able to withstand this high temperature, and the polycarbonate also can withstand high temperature, because the issue with ABS that we are using, it works fine up till 7 to 8 degrees, but it's not suitable for long time exposure for around 100 degrees. So we have this little bit more industrial grade versions of it. Again, the same APA6 support, everything's the same. It just will be different batteries and different casings. So the question is Monarch usable? Yes, but is it really it just works? It just happens the same way as you had on the first slide of Sigfox, the Sigfox promise. So Monarch is definitely a cool technology. It's a nice way how you can detect which radio zone you are located at, but we really recommend doing a proper discovery and proper use case definition for each of the Monarch project, because it's not like automatic. It's not like, you know, enable Monarch and it will work automatically for 10 years all over the world. This is really not the use case. So it needs to have proper discovery. You need to know the routes. You have different options how to switch the radio zones. So it's always you need to understand the customer, their needs, and so it's not magic, it's not automatic, but it needs work. But it's when it's done, so it works properly. So I think that was my last slide. Do we have any questions that I could answer? We were really quick to that today. You should ask, the question is, what is the reason beacons are not activated on all base stations? Is there a plan to send beacons from all base stations? Good question. Ask Sigfox better than us. I was at least, one of the things that we are pushing is to have at least on all base station 1 beacon a day. So for instance, when your device misses the port, and it's because normally what we recommend doing is really to listen to the beacon. If the beacon is not working, so switch by time to the proper time zone. But definitely better solution would be to have at least like once a day beacon on all the base stations. So for instance, if you miss the port and it's somewhere in the stock in your factory, in your company, so you are able to listen to it for 1 day continuously, it would consume you. Definitely, it would consume you. I would say, if you listen to 1 minute, it would be 8 messages. So you would listen it would be like 100 messages. It would be like 100 messages an hour. It would be like 1,000 messages a day probably. So it would consume some of your battery, but at least the device will be not lost completely. So because if you miss the port, so you have no way how to communicate with the device other than manually switching it to the different radio zone. So that's one of the things that we are pushing Sigfox to do. So to send at least a daily beacon out of all the base stations. Question from Francois: does the tech shut off automatically during the flight and turns back on upper landing? It depends on your business logic. You know that according to airline regulations, the techs are supposed to switch off during and you are supposed to have 2 independent ways how to switch off the tech during the flight. So SimpleHw can be definitely switched off and on by the logic in the device. It depends on the use case that and on your business logic that you want to implement. We are the SimpleHw supports shutting off automatically during the flight. Which countries support Monarch system? I think that all countries enabled by Sigfox, so I would assume 60 countries worldwide. If you have access to the Sigfox backend, I will try to share my screen with you. Screen sharing. I will show you the. I'm sorry that I didn't try it before, but I will. Basically, if you go to the Sigfox backend and you go to the network coverage, so there is a tab which is showing you the Monarch beacon. So it shows you which countries or which base stations are enabled. I'm not able to show it to you right now. Send me an email if you wouldn't be able to find it. I will post a screenshot into the presentation, the URL into the presentation later on. Will Monarch system be provided by 5G? 5G is a little bit buzzword, so it's an all-encompassing technology. Monarch is purely Sigfox specific technology. I don't think it's anyhow related to 5G or 5G, and it is anyhow related to Monarch. So I will add the screenshot from the backend regarding the. It will not be detailed because I don't know. I'm not sure whether it's a public information. But if you have access to the Sigfox backend, you can list it. You can list it yourself, and you can see which airports are enabled worldwide with Monarch. For any more questions. If not, so I'm looking forward to the couple of next webinars. We are preparing a couple of more for you. I think that the next one will be pretty interesting. Sigfox coverage, what you always wanted to know and you were afraid to ask. Then we have some very new cool features in IOFrog, which is probably the best platform for Sigfox. Then we have a winner, a theme that was winning the competition for the new themes, and that are the ingredients of successful IoT project delivery. And the last one in November is whether your cheese is at correct temperature, so cold chain monitoring using Sigfox and using SimpleHw. So you have the links for registration. Thanks for your attention. How can we approach you for more queries? You can. We have an online chat. You can email us at info@simplehw.eu. You can email me at pavel@sodomka.cz. So we are. Just contact us anyway, and we'll try to respond to the questions. Okay, thanks for your attention, and beautiful morning in Latam, beautiful afternoon in Europe, and have a good night for Japan. Thank you. Bye bye.